It was the kind of night no one should be out in a Denver snowstorm, thick as memory, silent as regret. Yet through the swirling white, a small golden dog appeared, alone, trembling, and carrying something precious on its back. No one could explain what came next, not even the doctors. Because when a child is left with nothing, sometimes the only one who answers has four paws. Stay with us. What follows is a story of sacrifice, healing, and a loyalty that defied the coldest night. It was nearing midnight in Denver, Colorado, and the city lay muted beneath a thick white blanket. Snowflakes danced beneath the glow of street lamps, and the streets were empty, soundless, as if the world itself were holding its breath. Outside St. Augustine Medical Center, a small aging hospital nestled between an old church and a post office, the red emergency sign blinked slowly in the storm, casting a faint glow across the snowy entrance. Inside the lobby, the only sound was the soft buzz of overhead lights. James Calloway, the night security guard, sat hunched behind the front desk. In his early 50s, James was broad-shouldered with a slightly rounded belly, his once military posture softened by years of night shifts and quiet routines. His face bore the stillness of a man who had seen too much fire and too few happy endings. A silver bracelet on his wrist, engraved with a fallen comrade's name, was his only adornment. He was halfway through a worn paperback when the motion sensor lights outside flickered on. James glanced up. Through the swirling snow, a shadow moved, low, steady, deliberate. He stood, eyes narrowing as he stepped closer to the glass doors. What he saw made his heart clench. A small golden retriever, no older than 2 years, was climbing the final steps toward the hospital entrance. His fur was matted with ice and snow, his breath short and quick. Clinging tightly to the dog's back, wrapped in an old hoodie tied across the shoulders like a sling, was a child, a toddler. Her arms were draped loosely around the dog's neck, head slumped forward, curls frozen into the fabric. James's hand slammed the emergency release, and the glass doors parted with a hiss. "Oh my God," he breathed. The dog staggered in paws, slipping slightly on the tile. He didn't bark. He didn't panic. He made it 3 more steps, then slowly lay down without a sound, allowing James to carefully lift the bundled child from his back. She was barely 2 years old. Her skin was ice-cold lips, pale cheeks hollow from dehydration. Her breath was shallow, her pulse faint. James shouted into his radio, "We've got a child, possible hypothermia. Urgent, get Dr. Hart down here now. Upstairs." Dr. Emily. Hart jolted awake in the on-call room. Tall and slender with auburn curls pulled into a tired bun and wire-frame glasses perpetually slipping down her nose, Emily had the kind of face that wore concern like a second skin. Her hands were small, precise. Years earlier, she'd lost her younger brother to a preventable infection in a rural clinic. Since then, she had poured everything into pediatric care, often at the cost of sleep, relationships, and weekends. She arrived in the ER barefoot in her Scrubs lab coat, fluttering behind her eyes wide. The sight of James holding the limp child and the dog collapsed on the floor beside him stopped her cold. Trauma room. One, she said, already reaching for the child. As the child was rushed away with nurses, Emily knelt beside the dog. His eyes fluttered open for a moment, dark-wide and exhausted. She reached out gently. "You got her here," she whispered. "You did good." The dog, too weak to move, closed his eyes again. He had no collar, no tags, no chip. But someone had once cared for him. His coat, though dirty, had signs of regular grooming, and the hoodie wrapped around him had been secured with careful knots. Emily noted the faded letters printed on the fabric, "South Ridge Community Shelter." While Emily oversaw the toddler's stabilization, fluids oxygen warming protocol, Nurse Amanda Bell entered the room. In her early 40s, Amanda had sharp eyes, a brisk tone, and the gait of a lifelong runner. Years earlier, she had lost her younger brother to heat stroke, waiting on an ambulance that arrived too late. Now she moved fast and trusted instinct over protocol. Vitals weak, but holding Amanda reported. No visible trauma, just malnourished and cold as death. She was riding that dog's back in a sling, James added. He carried her through a storm. Amanda blinked, then shook her head. Jesus. Emily leaned over the child, brushing a damp curl from her forehead. She's a fighter, but we need to find out where she came from. Meanwhile, the golden retriever was taken to the therapy wing. Lily, a young vet intern with round glasses and a soft voice, checked him over. No microchip, she reported. Scar on the back leg surgical. He's been patched up before. Emily sat beside the sleeping dog. You're not just a stray. Someone taught you to care. 2 hours later, as dawn began to brighten the edges of the city, the toddler stirred in her bed. Her tiny fingers twitched, and her eyes blinked open muddy green, glassy with fatigue. She scanned the room, slowly disoriented. Then she saw the dog. He had been wheeled in on a soft blanket, still sleeping, but near her bed. The girl lifted one hand barely above the blanket and whispered something faint. "Sonny?" Emily's breath caught. She leaned in. "Is that his name?" The girl nodded slightly before falling asleep again. And so, the dog had a name. Sonny. He had carried her through the storm, across ice and streets, and fear not because someone commanded him, but because someone trusted him. A silent promise made between a child and a dog, honored in the coldest night. The dawn in Denver was colorless, just shades of gray folding into blue, smeared across the sky, like charcoal on wet paper. Snow still drifted gently over the city, softening rooftops and blanketing parked cars with hush. At St. Augustine Medical Center, the early morning buzz had begun, coffee brewing clipboards clattering, lives beginning or ending between curtained walls. But in trauma room, one time moved differently. It held its breath. The toddler girl lay curled beneath a warming blanket, her small chest rising and falling in shallow rhythm. 2 IVs fed her fluids and electrolytes, while heated air blew gently across her body. A pulse oximeter blinked at her fingertip, too dim to be comforting. The medical chart taped to her bed read, Jane Doe, S-join 24 months. Severe dehydration, hypothermia. Stage 1, nutritional deficit. Dr. Emily Hart stood nearby, arms folded, gaze locked on the girl. Emily hadn't changed clothes since the night before. Her auburn curls had fallen loose from the bun, and dark circles under her hazel eyes deepened by the fluorescent light. Still she looked composed, controlled. Only the tight press of her lips betrayed how shaken she was. Emily had seen abandoned children before, but this was different. The girl hadn't been dropped off at a station or left at a church. She had been carried through a blizzard by a dog with no name. She turned to Nurse Amanda Bell, who was now rechecking the girl's vitals. Amanda's sharp eyes softened when she looked at the child. Stable for now, she murmured. Still hasn't stirred. No one's come asking. Emily nodded. Let's run a toxicology screen just in case. And I want her scanned for injuries. Bruising bone, trauma, anything. As Amanda left, Emily headed down the hall toward the therapy wing where the golden retriever had been taken. The therapy wing wasn't meant for emergencies. It was quiet, filled with plants and children's paintings. There near the heater, the dog lay curled up on a thick towel, his body no longer shaking. His golden fur was still damp, but cleaner now. A veterinary intern named Lily, a petite, cheerful woman with a fondness for animals and oversized hoodies, sat nearby scribbling notes on a clipboard. He's a fighter, Lily said softly as Emily approached. No microchip, no tags, no visible trauma except an old surgical scar on his back leg. And get this, he kept trying to walk back out the door. Emily crouched beside the dog. She studied his eyes, deep brown, intelligent, and filled with something she couldn't name. Worry, loyalty, grief. He was small for a golden, maybe 40 pounds. Likely still young, around 2 years old, with soft ears and a narrow snout. But there was something aged in his posture, like a child made old too early. He carried her through a storm, Emily murmured, and didn't let her go. Lily looked up. Do you think someone sent him? I think someone trusted him. Emily reached out. The dog didn't flinch. He leaned forward and gently touched his nose to her hand, the way someone might offer a promise. She glanced at Lily. Let's keep him under observation for now. I want him monitored for infection, frostbite, and fatigue. Just as she stood to leave, a soft knock came from the hallway. Miguel Santos, one of the hospital's newer pediatric nurses, stepped in. Miguel was 28, lean and wiry, with olive-toned skin and dark, serious eyes. He wore his badge clipped to his scrubs and had a tattoo of a small violin behind his left ear, an homage to his late mother, who had been a music teacher in Albuquerque. Miguel was quiet, gentle with children, and often overlooked in a room, not because he lacked presence, but because he seemed to carry his own quiet world within him. Sorry to interrupt, Miguel said. I think I know that girl. Emily turned sharply. What? Miguel stepped closer, lowering his voice. 2 months ago, I volunteered at the Lakewood shelter during the evacuation after that gas leak. There was a young woman homeless, looked scared all the time with a baby. Same hair, same blanket. The baby wouldn't stop crying unless she held her. Emily frowned. Did you get a name? Miguel shook his head. No ID. She never spoke to anyone unless she had to. I only know because she shared a peanut butter sandwich with me after I gave her a clean blanket. Do you remember anything else? Where she went? She disappeared 2 days before the shelter closed. Some of the volunteers thought she'd been taken in by her boyfriend. Others thought she just ran. Emily absorbed that quietly. If she's the mother, she may be in trouble too. Miguel looked down at the dog. That's why I came here. I recognized the blanket. I think that dog belonged to her. He followed her everywhere, never on a leash, always just watching. Emily knelt again by the golden retriever, whose tail gave one soft thump. You're more than a hero, aren't you? She whispered. You're the only one who knows where she is. For a long moment, no one spoke. Then Emily stood. Get me a report from the Lakewood shelter. Any logs, medical records, security footage, anything that might help us ID the mother, and alert social services. If we don't find the parents within 24 hours, this child becomes a ward of the state. Miguel nodded, already moving. Back in the trauma room, the little girl stirred, just a twitch of the fingers at first, then a faint moan as she turned her head to the side. Amanda leaned over her, quickly adjusting the oxygen tube. She's waking up, she said into the intercom. Emily rushed in, heart pounding. The girl's eyes opened, muddy green and glassy. She didn't cry. She didn't speak. But her gaze moved across the room, searching, until it landed on the doorway where the little dog somehow had padded in silently behind Emily. For the first time, the child's lips moved. A single sound escaped, soft as breath. Sonny. Emily turned to the dog. Is that your name? The dog's ears perked. His tail thumped once more. They didn't know who he belonged to, where he came from, or how he'd found the hospital. But now they had something, a name. And sometimes that was enough to begin. By mid-morning, the storm had faded into soft flurries, and the city of Denver slowly re-emerged beneath a dusting of snow. Plows had carved narrow lanes through the streets, and the skyline beyond the hospital shimmered under pale winter light. Inside St. Augustine Medical Center, the mystery surrounding the little girl and her loyal dog was spreading like quiet wildfire. Doctors, nurses, and even janitors whispered theories between rounds. Who was she? Who had raised a dog like that, and why had no one come forward? Detective Caroline Reese arrived just after 10 a.m., summoned by Emily's urgent request. Reese was in her early 40s, tall and broad-shouldered, with a long auburn ponytail and sharp, calculating eyes. A veteran of the Denver PD, she had built her career on cases involving missing persons and endangered children. Her reputation was unshakable, thorough, unflinching, and deeply protective of the vulnerable. Her only visible sign of wear was the limp in her right leg, a souvenir from a case gone wrong 5 years ago, when she'd pulled a girl from a burning house moments before the roof collapsed. Emily met her in the front lobby, cradling a hot coffee that had long since gone cold. Detective Reese, thank you for coming. You said a child came in, carried by a dog. Emily nodded. She's stable now. No ID, no family contact. The dog, he's different. He brought her here through the snow. Something tells me this wasn't random. Reese didn't laugh. She didn't raise an eyebrow. She only said, "Where's the dog now?" They led her to the therapy wing, where Sonny sat beside the toddler's recovery crib, like a sentry, ears twitching at every sound. When Reese approached, the dog's eyes locked with hers, curious but not fearful. "He's been trying to leave," said Miguel, standing nearby. "Every time the door opens, he gets up like he's ready to guide someone." Reese knelt beside Sonny. She had a way with animals, not through affection, but presence. Steady, grounded, confident. "You know the way back, don't you?" Sonny tilted his head, then turned toward the door, tail still. Reese stood. "We follow him." It took some convincing, but within the hour, Sonny was secured with a makeshift harness and leash, and Reese, alongside a young patrol officer named Daniel Crowley, set out on foot behind him. Crowley was 25, eager and bright-eyed, his rookie badge still gleaming. He was tall and lanky, with a boyish charm that often put civilians at ease. Reese tolerated his questions with quiet amusement, but valued his good instincts and endurance. Sonny led them north out of the main grid, past quiet neighborhoods and frozen parks, until the pavement gave way to gravel roads winding into the outskirts of Denver's hill country. Snow crunched beneath their boots. The dog didn't hesitate. He moved with silent confidence, nose low, occasionally glancing back to ensure they followed. After nearly an hour, they reached a narrow path leading into a stand of pine trees. At the end of the path sat a weathered wooden cabin, small, sagging, and half swallowed by snow. One of the windows was cracked. The roofline dipped precariously. No smoke rose from the chimney. Reese signaled for silence and approached the door. It creaked open with little resistance. The air inside was stale, tinged with mildew and dust. The single-room cabin was dim, but enough light filtered through the broken blinds to reveal its contents. In one corner sat an old baby crib with a torn mesh side. Nearby, a plastic bottle empty and yellowed lay on its side. There was no food, no signs of warmth, no electricity. Reese moved slowly, methodically. A small bag of diapers was tucked into a drawer. A faded baby blanket covered a worn recliner. Most strikingly pinned to the wall above the crib, a handwritten letter. She pulled on gloves and removed it carefully. The paper was wrinkled and slightly damp. The ink had bled in places, but the words were still legible. To whoever finds her, please don't let her die. I can't take care of her. I'm sorry. She's all I have, but I have nothing to give. If you find her, her name is Ellie. I love her more than life. Please, save her. Reese's jaw tightened. She folded the letter and placed it in an evidence pouch. Whoever wrote this was desperate, she murmured, but loved her enough to send help. Through a dog, Crowley added softly. Sonny was pacing now, nose sniffing the floor near a pile of crumpled blankets. Reese followed his gaze and noticed a thread of blood dried onto the wood floor. Kneeling, she saw faint prints, human bare feet, walking away from the crib. Not running, just leaving. She walked out of here with no shoes, Reese said, tracing the prints to the threshold. No food, no heat, no choice. Back in the car, as the heater hummed and Reese held the letter in her gloved hands, she said, she didn't abandon the child. She sacrificed everything to save her. They returned to the hospital just before sunset. Emily was waiting. I found this in the cabin, Reese said, handing her the letter. The girl's name is Ellie, the mother's still missing. Emily read it, her eyes stinging. This changes everything. That evening, Emily re-examined Sonny's surgical scar on his leg. She consulted the veterinary files again and made a call to a local rescue organization. One of the older volunteers remembered a report, a golden retriever adopted by a young woman without a fixed address about a year ago. They remembered the woman being soft-spoken and scared, clinging to the dog as if he were her anchor. Emily hung up her chest tight with emotion. This wasn't just about survival anymore. This was about love, fierce, quiet, and nearly forgotten, etched into wood floors and paw prints scribbled into paper in a trembling hand carried on the back of a dog who refused to give up. The sky above Denver turned the color of iron-heavy clouds rolling back in after a brief reprieve. The city wore its silence like a wound muffled in white, as if it too were holding its breath. At St. Augustine Medical Center, the photograph of a toddler with wide green eyes and tangled curls had been printed and shared among shelters, churches, soup kitchens, anywhere someone might recognize her. Her name now known, Ellie. Her guardian and unlikely hero, a golden retriever with a scarred leg and a history of loyalty. But her mother, Claire, was still a phantom. Detective Caroline Reese sat in her unmarked cruiser with the heat on full blast, flipping through field reports. The letter from the cabin was still in her coat pocket. Her instincts told her the mother had never gone far. Not someone who'd risked everything to save her child. She was still out there, alone, likely cold, and deteriorating fast. A tip finally came from a night volunteer named Harold Keyes, a retired librarian who spent his evenings handing out blankets at Sloan Lake Park. Harold was a short-stooped man with a salt-and-pepper beard, an oversized parka, and a soft spot for lost souls. He'd told a social worker at a nearby mission that he'd seen a woman staring at the lake for over an hour, mumbling to a dog who wasn't there. She looked undone, Harold had said, like someone half here, half back in time. She wasn't asking for anything, just lost. Reese drove there immediately. Sloan Lake Park, even under a dusting of snow, had a strange beauty. Bare trees arching over a frozen path, gray ice rippling across the lake's surface. And seated on a bench facing the water arms wrapped around herself, despite the biting cold, was a woman, Claire Morgan. She appeared barely 30, though the hollows in her cheeks and the deep circles under her eyes aged her. Her hair, once chestnut, now clung in unwashed strands around her neck. She wore layers, none warm enough, oversized jeans, 2 flannel shirts, a coat with no buttons. Her boots were mismatched. She rocked slowly, not from cold, but from something deeper. Her lips moved soundless. In one hand, she clutched a piece of red yarn tied in a loose loop. Detective Reese approached with slow care. "Claire," she asked gently. The woman flinched and looked up, startled. Her eyes were distant, flickering between confusion and recognition. She didn't answer. Reese sat down beside her, not touching, not pressing. "Just there. I'm not here to arrest you. I just want to talk about Ellie." At the mention of the name, Claire blinked hard. Her mouth opened-closed again. "She's safe," Reese continued, voice low. "A dog brought her to St. Augustine. She's alive, breathing, warm." Claire's shoulders collapsed inward as if something inside her gave out. Her hands gripped the yarn tighter. "Sonny, I told him to take her. I told him." Reese nodded slowly. "And he did. You saved her." Tears began to roll down Claire's cheeks, but she didn't sob. Her grief was dry old. She spoke with a voice cracked and raw. "He followed me from the shelter. Wouldn't leave. When I couldn't feed Ellie anymore, when the formula ran out, he wouldn't stop looking at me, like he knew. He waited, every night, just waited." Reese listened, heart steady. "Can I take you to her?" Claire didn't move. In the distance, a woman approached from the park's west trail. She wore dark jeans, a fitted coat, and carried a medical bag. Emily Hart. Reese had called her, just in case Claire needed immediate evaluation. Emily had changed into warm civilian clothes, her hair loose under a knit cap. She moved with quiet certainty. Claire turned as Emily knelt before her, not too close. "Hi, Claire. I'm Emily. I've been taking care of Ellie." That name again, a fracture of hope. "She's asking for her dog," Emily said softly. "She calls him Sonny. He stays next to her crib. He hasn't left since she arrived." Claire let out a sound, not quite a sob, not quite a laugh. "Can you come with me?" Emily asked. "You don't have to do anything today. Just sit with her. Just see." For a moment, Claire looked at both women as if through fog. Then wordlessly she nodded. They drove back in silence. Emily sat in the back, with Claire gently wrapping a hospital blanket around her shoulders. At the entrance to the pediatric ward, nurses paused in stunned silence. Claire's eyes darted between fluorescent lights and the faces of strangers until she saw the dog. Sonny rose from his place beside Ellie's crib ears, forward tail still. He didn't bark. He didn't leap. He simply approached, touched his nose to Claire's knee, and sat. Claire knelt, cupping his face with trembling hands. "Good boy," she whispered. "You came back." Ellie stirred in her bed. Her eyes opened, drowsy but alert. Mama Claire turned. It was not a dramatic reunion, not loud or cinematic. It was a breath, a whisper. Claire pressed her forehead to Ellie's and wept. From the hallway, Reese watched with arms crossed tightly. Miguel, standing nearby, murmured, "Do we report this to Child Services?" "We do," Reese said. "But we also document everything. This woman didn't abandon her child. She made the hardest choice a mother could make. She trusted a dog to do what the world wouldn't." That night, Claire was admitted for psychiatric evaluation, voluntarily. She was diagnosed with postnatal depression, compounded by malnutrition and domestic trauma. The hospital staff moved carefully, compassionately. Emily advocated for mother and daughter to stay together during recovery. As the snow began to fall again outside, Sonny curled up between their beds, guarding them, healing with them. A small guardian in a world that had almost forgotten how to be kind. The snow hadn't stopped. It came down quietly, layering the city once more in stillness and white. Through the hospital windows, it looked peaceful, even beautiful. But for those inside St. Augustine Medical Center, the storm outside was nothing compared to the emotional weather swirling within. Claire sat near the pediatric wing window, wrapped in a heavy flannel robe, her hair brushed for the first time in days. Her cheeks still bore the faint hollows of malnutrition, but there was color now, warmth returning slowly to her bones. She held Ellie gently in her arms, the little girl's curls resting against her chest as she slept. Across the room, Sonny lay curled at their feet, half awake, his golden tail brushing back and forth whenever Ellie made a sound. Claire looked stronger, still pale, but with purpose now threaded into her spine. Her voice when she spoke to Emily no longer trembled. "I didn't think I'd ever see her like this again," she whispered. "Peaceful. Doctor." Emily Hart, now stepping fully into the role of quiet ally, offered a nod. "She's healing, and so are you." Later that day, Claire was transferred to The Haven, a respected residential recovery center on the southern edge of the city. The facility nestled among frostbitten trees and housed in a renovated former convent, specialized in trauma-informed psychiatric care for women and mothers. The woman who ran it, Sister Marianne Keller, was a former ER nurse turned advocate with a silver bun wrapped tight on her head, eyes that missed nothing, and a voice that could both soothe and command. She was tall, firm-backed, and walked with the deliberate pace of someone who had learned that rushing often broke things. Sister Marianne greeted Claire personally when she arrived. "We don't just mend the body here," she said. "We give the heart a place to unfold." Claire was given a private room modest but warm, with a large window overlooking an inner courtyard where birds gathered around a stone fountain. It was more peace than she had known in years. Meanwhile, Ellie remained under hospital observation for a few more days. She was well enough to giggle at cartoons to hug Sonny when he was allowed visits and to tug gently on Miguel's stethoscope. Miguel Santos had taken on an unofficial role, guardian playmate protector. He stayed longer after shifts brought warm meals from home, and even made small paper birds to hang above her crib. But when it came time to decide who would take Sonny while Claire recovered, Emily offered Miguel the choice. "Are you sure you can handle him?" she asked one evening in the hospital courtyard. Miguel, in his usual soft hoodie and navy scrubs, nodded. "I think he's already handling me." Sonny walked quietly beside Miguel, as if he'd been doing so for years. At Miguel's small apartment just east of Capitol Hill, the golden retriever adapted seamlessly, curled on the rug, padded softly between kitchen and couch, waited patiently at the door each morning. The two made a quiet team, each used to silence, but neither feeling lonely in it. Word of Sonny's story began to spread. A nurse posted a picture on social media, Sonny beside Ellie, his head resting on the side of her bed, eyes alert and tender. Within days, the image went viral. Local news outlets picked up the story. A dog who braved a blizzard to carry a child to safety. A mother battling to reclaim her life. A hospital team that chose compassion over protocol. The city responded with rare unity. Donations arrived at the hospital, and the Haven warm clothes, toys, letters of encouragement, even offers of permanent homes. But Emily and Sister Marianne declined all adoption inquiries. "She has a mother," Emily said simply, "and a future." From the support came a new opportunity. An organization called Voices of Valor, a Denver-based nonprofit focused on women's recovery and animal welfare, reached out to both Emily and Sister Marianne. Its founder, Teresa Blake, was a petite woman in her 50s, with long silver hair always braided over one shoulder, and a deep, gravelly voice from years of smoking and protest speeches. She had once been homeless herself, rescued by a program much like the one she now ran. Teresa visited the Haven on a snowy Thursday, holding a portfolio under her arm. She spoke directly with fire and warmth. "I don't want this to be just a miracle story that fades," she told Claire. "I want it to be a platform. People need to see that trauma doesn't make you weak. Surviving it does." She offered Claire a path forward once her recovery was complete. She could apply to join their transitional living program work with rescued therapy dogs and eventually train as a peer counselor. Claire didn't answer right away, but the light in her eyes when she looked at the picture of her and Ellie on Teresa's proposal form said enough. Later that evening, Emily received a call from Detective Reese. "We found Sonny's origin," Reese said. "His original name was Buddy. He was registered as a therapy dog at Silver Glen Recovery Center. Claire was admitted there 16 months ago. Records say he never bonded with any patient until her. When she left, he disappeared too." Emily turned toward the window where snow fell steadily. "He followed her," she said softly, "and he never stopped protecting her, even when she couldn't protect herself." At Miguel's apartment, Sonny seemed at home, but each evening when he looked toward the window and watched the snow fall, Miguel could see something still live behind his eyes, a thread connecting him to the girl, the woman the promises made in silence on cold nights. On one such evening, Miguel sat on the couch, a cup of tea in one hand, Sonny's head resting beside him. He spoke aloud without turning. "You weren't just running. You were delivering something." Sonny thumped his tail once. Even with the city blanketed in snow, there was warmth inside the pediatric wing of St. Augustine Medical Center. Ellie had started laughing again, soft, breathy giggles that made the nurses pause and smile. She chased small rays of light with her fingers and squealed whenever Sonny walked in. The little dog's presence was no longer just a comfort. It had become a ritual. Every morning, he would trot down the polished hallway, ears perked, and sit patiently at the edge of her crib until she reached for him. Claire had been at the Haven for just under a week. The early days were quiet, filled with long silences and tentative questions. The other women kept a respectful distance, sensing something still fragile about her presence. But Sister Mary Ann, with her deep-rooted calm and steady hands, checked in on Claire each evening without fail. Claire spent most afternoons in the art room, a space filled with large windows, tables covered in paint-stained cloths, and shelves stacked with donated supplies. There she began painting nothing grand, just soft shapes at first. Trees, windows, sometimes silhouettes of a child and a dog, and gradually her hands shook less. One morning, while mixing shades of green, Claire noticed someone new at the far corner of the room. A woman in her early 30s with short black curls and almond-toned skin, wearing a thick navy cardigan over a worn t-shirt that read, "You matter more than your mistakes." Her name tag said, Lena. Lena caught Claire's glance and offered a small smile. "First time here?" Claire nodded. "Just started painting again." "Same. I mostly do collages. Used to think it was silly cutting and gluing stuff like a kindergartner. But sometimes it's easier to make sense of things by breaking them into pieces first." Claire looked down at her brush, then quietly said, "That's how I feel." The two women fell into an easy rhythm over the next few days. They didn't speak much at first, but their silence was companionable. Over time, Lena opened up, shared that she had been in the Haven for nearly 3 months after escaping a relationship that had swallowed 6 years of her life. She was rebuilding, slowly, quietly, and she wasn't the only one. Back at the hospital, Miguel's connection with Sonny grew deeper. The apartment had become a sanctuary not just for the dog, but for Miguel himself. He found comfort in the quiet companionship, in the way Sonny sat beside him during long evenings, in how the dog would rest his chin on Miguel's knee during the news. Sometimes Miguel would wake in the early morning hours, gasping from a dream he couldn't quite remember. And there Sonny would be already sitting at the edge of the bed, watching, waiting. No judgment, no noise, just presence. One night after leaving the hospital late, Miguel found himself lingering in the parking lot, reluctant to drive away. He called Emily. "She's making progress," Emily assured him. "Claire too," I know Miguel said. "It's just, I keep thinking about that night, about how he knew where to go, about how she trusted him." Emily was quiet for a moment. He wasn't trained for rescue, but maybe loyalty doesn't need training. Maybe it's just love given a direction. A few days later, Claire received her first visitor pass to return to the hospital. She arrived wearing a borrowed coat, her hair in a loose braid. When she stepped into Ellie's room, Sonny let out a soft bark just once and wagged his tail in slow, full arcs. Ellie reached her arms out immediately. Mama Claire gathered her into a hug, pressing her face into her daughter's shoulder. She whispered over and over, "I missed you. I missed you so much." Emily, watching from the doorway, saw something shift, an invisible thread between mother and child, strained but unbroken, pulling tight once again. After the visit, Claire sat with Miguel in the family lounge while Ellie napped. "She's still herself," Claire said, eyes damp. "She still remembers." "She never stopped," Miguel replied. Neither did Sonny. Claire smiled faintly. "Do you ever wonder what would have happened if he hadn't brought her?" Miguel nodded. "Every day. But then I remember he did. And you trusted him too." That evening, Emily received a letter from Voices of Valor, the nonprofit moved by the public response to Sonny's story, wanted to offer Claire and Ellie a place in their new transitional housing program. The catch: they wanted Claire to help develop a new initiative using trained dogs to support at-risk women through their recovery. They were calling it the Sonny Program. Claire sat on her bed at the Haven that night, holding the letter. Outside her window, the garden lights glowed and snowflakes fluttered past like feathers. She thought of the cold nights in the cabin, of the silence, of the breathless moment she had whispered to Sonny, "Take her." She never imagined it would lead here. She looked over at the small canvas on her bedside table, a painting of a child holding the paw of a golden dog beneath a tree without leaves. Then she smiled. Denver's winter held tight, wrapping the city in frost and silver blue skies. Snow still hugged the rooftops and sidewalks, but it no longer felt heavy. It felt expectant. Inside St. Augustine Medical Center, pine garlands curled along the handrails. Paper snowflakes spun from the ceiling tiles, and soft carols drifted from a small radio behind the nurse's station. Christmas was only a few days away, and for once the hospital did not feel like a place of endings. It felt like a beginning. Ellie was stronger now. She could stand in her crib without wobbling squeal with delight at the jingling sound of a nurse's keys, and reach eagerly toward the door whenever she heard padded paws on tile. When Sonny appeared that morning, freshly brushed a small red bow clipped near his collar, she gasped, eyes wide. Then, for the first time since she was brought in, she laughed. A real unguarded belly-deep laugh. Emily Hart had stepped into the room just in time to hear it. The sound startled her, and she paused mid-step, hand still on the doorknob. Then she smiled. That moment sealed it. By noon, Emily had gone to the hospital director's office with a proposition. Her tone was soft, but unwavering, the kind she reserved for arguments she had already won in her mind. Let us hold a small Christmas reunion, just Claire and Ellie, nothing public, 1 hour. You've seen the progress she's stabilizing emotionally because of the connection. Because of him. She nodded toward Sonny, who waited patiently in the hallway, tail thumping at regular intervals. The director, a narrow-faced man named Dr. Kenneth Rourke, wore horn-rimmed glasses and a permanent air of controlled detachment. He had overseen St. Augustine for almost a decade, known for his efficiency more than empathy. But even he had been moved by the story unfolding in his hospital's halls. He sighed, then scribbled a quick approval on a request form. Fine, but keep it off social media. One mistake, and legal shuts it down. Emily nodded. Thank you. That same afternoon, Claire arrived at the hospital in a soft gray coat donated by a volunteer, her hands clutched nervously around a scarf. Her face was still pale, but her eyes were alive, sharp with hope. She carried a small red box inside a tiny crocheted hat she'd made at the Havens Crafting Group, one strand of Ellie's favorite color woven into the brim. Ellie was already sitting up in bed when Claire walked in, her little fingers clutching a snowman plushie. Her eyes widened. Mama Claire crossed the room in 3 quick steps, tears already clouding her vision. She knelt beside the bed as Sonny gently approached, brushing his head against Claire's leg. Emily stepped outside to give them space, but even through the glass, she could see the light in the room shift. It was like someone had opened a window to let spring inside right in the middle of December. Word of the reunion spread quietly among the hospital staff, and more than a few paused near the room, pretending to check equipment or adjust schedules just to witness the scene, the mother gently placing the hat on her child's head, the dog curling up beneath the bed like a guardian angel who had found his way home. Across the city in a small TV studio on Colfax Avenue, Miguel sat under warm studio lights, slightly flushed under the powder makeup dusted over his cheekbones. It was his first live interview, and the producer, a high-energy woman named Dana Marks, short pixie-cut, leopard print blazer, and a voice like morning espresso, had practically begged him to speak. "We're not just reporting a miracle," she'd said. "We're sharing a truth people forgot they needed." Miguel sat in a high chair, fingers nervously interlocked in his lap. The host, Grant Leland, was a seasoned anchor, with silver hair and a smile that disarmed even the most camera-shy guests. Grant leaned forward. "Miguel, tell us what went through your mind when you saw that little dog bring in a child." On that snowy night, Miguel hesitated, then answered. At first disbelief, but then awe. Not because it was a miracle, but because it felt like something that had been in motion for a long time, like love had carried that child here, love and loyalty. He shared the story, how Sonny had once been a therapy dog, how Claire had been broken but never abandoned her daughter, how that dog had remembered everything, even the way back to safety. He spoke softly but with conviction, and by the time he finished, the studio was silent. Back at the hospital, the segment aired on every available screen. Nurses paused mid-shift. Patients in waiting rooms set down magazines. And in the pediatric lounge, Claire and Emily sat side by side with Ellie curled between them, watching Miguel speak. When the interview ended, a flood of messages poured into the station. Hundreds of letters followed over the next 2 days, from mothers who had once been afraid, from men who regretted walking away, from children who had grown up in silence. They wrote to say thank you, to say they had cried, to say that Sonny's story reminded them of something lost and something worth returning to. The hospital printed many of them, taping them along the wall outside Ellie's room. By Christmas Eve, the hallway glowed with color, handwritten cards, crayon drawings, even a painting of Sonny standing on a hill with a child in his mouth, snow falling all around. Miguel visited that night, carrying a small pine tree wrapped in burlap. He placed it at the foot of Ellie's crib and added a single ornament, a wooden heart engraved with the word, "Believe." Sonny sat beside it like he knew the word was for him. 3 months had passed. The snow had melted from Denver's streets, giving way to early spring crocuses and the scent of wet bark in the wind. The sky, once steely and silent, now held streaks of gold and lavender in the mornings. Life, like the soil, was thawing. In a quiet neighborhood on the west side of the city, nestled between an elementary school and a row of maple trees just beginning to bud, stood a small, pale blue house. It had 2 bedrooms, a white mailbox with a red flag, and a front yard barely large enough for a picnic blanket. But for Claire, it might as well have been a palace. The house was a gift, not charity, but recognition. Voices of Valor, the nonprofit that had supported her journey, had secured the property as part of their re-entry program for single mothers in recovery. It was modest, fully paid for the first year, with utilities covered, and an optional part-time job at their downtown animal care center once Claire was ready. Claire stood barefoot in the kitchen that morning, watching sunlight pour through the window. She wore an old t-shirt tucked into clean jeans, and her hair, now trimmed to her shoulders, framed her face with softness she hadn't known in years. She moved with quiet intention, setting 2 bowls of cereal, checking the temperature of a bottle, humming under her breath. On the living room floor, Ellie lay on her stomach, drawing with crayons. Her curls bounced with every movement, and she occasionally giggled at a stuffed giraffe she'd placed beside her. Near her feet, Sonny rested with his head on his paws, his eyes half closed in that alert way only dogs know, relaxed yet ready at a moment's notice. The red collar around his neck gleamed faintly in the light, and on the engraved tag one could read the simple words, "I kept my promise." A knock came at the door. Claire opened it to find Emily Hart standing on the porch holding a small potted plant and wearing a cardigan over her scrubs. She looked tired in the way doctors often did, gracefully, so like someone who had learned how to carry other people's pain without letting it drown her. "First housewarming gift," Emily said with a smile. "It's hard to kill. Like you." Claire laughed and stepped aside. "Come in." Inside, the air smelled faintly of chamomile and oatmeal. Toys were neatly tucked into bins near the couch, and a bookshelf held secondhand volumes on parenting psychology and 1 copy of Charlotte's Web. Emily placed the plant on the windowsill and knelt beside Ellie. "How's my favorite girl?" Ellie held up a picture of a sun with stick figures standing underneath. "That's me and Mama and Sonny," she announced proudly. Emily looked closer. "And what's that above the sun?" "It says, 'Safe now.' Mama helped me write it." Claire, standing behind them, blinked quickly and busied herself pouring tea. Later, the 3 of them sat on the porch steps watching the street. A little boy across the road rode his tricycle in uneven circles. Birds chattered in the tree above. Everything was unremarkable in the best way possible. "Do you ever think," Claire asked softly, "that some lives begin again, right in the middle?" Emily sipped her tea. "I think the middle is the best place for a new beginning." Just then, Miguel appeared at the edge of the yard, waving. He wore a faded blue hoodie and carried a paper bag. "Brought muffins," he called, "and dog biscuits. I couldn't show up empty-handed." Claire grinned. "You'll always be welcome." Miguel had remained in their lives, not out of obligation, but out of something quieter and deeper. He was part of the story now, the part that stayed after the news stopped talking. He had taken a part-time role with Voices of Valor to help other children navigate the foster system. His bond with Sonny remained unchanged, even as Sonny had naturally returned to Ellie's side full-time. Sonny stood up, padded to Miguel, and bumped his head against the man's hip before returning to his spot beside Ellie. Claire looked at them, all of them. Emily, Miguel, Ellie, Sonny, and for the first time in years, she did not feel like a broken branch trying to reattach itself to the tree. She felt rooted. That afternoon, after Miguel and Emily left, Claire and Ellie sat on the floor near the large front window. The sunlight was bright, but gentle, brushing across the hardwood like a golden river. Claire opened a book and began to read aloud. Sonny lay at Ellie's feet. His ears flicked at the sound of her giggle. His body rose and fell in steady rhythm. Outside, children rode bikes. A neighbor walked past with a dog. Life moved forward, unaware that inside one small house, a circle had finally closed. Not with an ending, but with a vow fulfilled. Sometimes love doesn't arrive with grand gestures, but with quiet loyalty, like a small dog who never gave up. And maybe in our own lives, we need to ask ourselves this one question: who would we walk through the snow for? Share this story if it touched you. Comment below with a moment you witnessed silent loyalty, and don't forget to subscribe for more true stories that restore hope.